Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 623. Today we're going to talk about Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team. And this is exactly how it sounds. You're playing Warhammer 40,000 with a different set of rules than what's currently in their 8th edition, but you're using a very small kind of elite force, a kill team. You're going to have anywhere from like 5 to maybe 12 models or so, depending on the faction that you pick. And it's going to be fought on a very small footprint of a battlefield. I think the board that actually comes in this box is 22 or 20 inches by 30 inches, something around that. And it also comes with some ruins for terrain and stuff like that. It's a little bit of a spoiler in terms of the review part, but it actually works really well on such a small footprint. Typically with a skirmish game of this level where you're moving kind of individual models, it's usually like a 3 by 3 foot table or 4 by 4 foot. This actually works just fine, and they've even said that you could play it. I think the realm of battle boards that you can get are 2 by 2, but I'm kind of confused on that because I think they also have realm of battle boards that match the size of the boards in here that you can get. You can get like boxes of like 8 of them, or excuse me, 4 boards or 2 boards double-sided, something like that, and then you also kind of get terrain in there. So there's going to be some other kind of modular type of things that you can do. You can mix and match terrain. There's going to be kill zone expansions that are sort of dedicatedly made for this game that uses different terrain, and each of the different places that you're going to fight has different environmental rules and stuff. I'll show you some of that with what comes in this box. But let's jump down and take a look at the gameplay. It's sort of, in some ways, you could read it as sort of a tweak on Warhammer 40,000 8th edition. There's definitely some significant differences, but it keeps a lot of the same sort of stuff involved. So let's jump down and take a look, and then I'll come back here and tell you what I think. So here I've got 2 kill teams sort of set up, and this is the ruins that you actually get in the box there. Now these have been painted up. This is sort of colored plastic. It's not a gray plastic, and it has sort of the same colors you see here. It's more of a lighter beige than I painted it up here, but you can clip these out of the sprues and paint them up, and it goes pretty much and does a good job of sort of covering up the table and kind of line of sight blocking. Now I've been playing here with the Deathwatch, which I've got a boatload of models for, and then also the Genestealer Cult, which I have. That's basically my 240k armies. I have a Deathwatch army and a Genestealer Cult army, several thousand points of those. But the models that come in the box are actually Genestealer Cult, which is handy for me, and then also Adeptus Mechanicus. You can see these in red. And these are also colored plastic, and I've left these bare for now. I definitely will be painting these up sometime in the future, but just to give you kind of a sense of the models. These are the typical sprues that you will get. So these are Acolyte hybrids in the case of the Genestealer Cults. It's the exact same sprue from what I can tell as you would normally get. They just happen to be colored. So you can optionally fit them out with different weapons. I was kind of lacking in the shotgun department with the models that I have because I haven't been running shotguns at all. So I built a bunch of these with shotguns, and like this fella here, you can see I gave him this Cult icon and then a auto gun and stuff like that. And then you've got here these Rangers here. These are from the Adeptus Mechanicus, and I built them as Rangers. This group here, you can actually build kind of as 2 separate things. You could build them as Rangers or Vanguard Hunters and so on. You can make your choices there. But these are pretty cool. They're nice and color-coded, so if you want to just jump in and play, you won't have a bunch of gray plastic on the table. You can obviously easily differentiate the models based on their color, which is cool. Now the other stuff that you're going to get for the specific factions, you're going to get a bunch of tokens here. You can see I've got the Mechanicus tokens there for charging, moving, and running, and all that kind of stuff. You can use it to mark stuff up. And then there's some pink ones there for the Genestealer Cult. And they give you a whole bunch of cards and things too. So let's take a look at these cards. So here you can see a card. This is a named sort of character there. If you want, you could build your models to kind of match up these. So this one's got an arc rifle, and he's actually a gunner and so on. And you know, you could build them exactly like this. This one's a specialist, which I'll talk about in a minute. You can see that there. But they also give you a ton of these blank ones, like so. And so then as you build them, you can put in their stat lines and what weapons you equip them with and so on. Like for example, this Deathwatch character here, he has a frag cannon. That's pretty fun. I put that on him. And then this guy here has a Infernus heavy bolter, which I never use in 8th edition, but I was like, I'm going to use this guy. So he's got that there. So the point cost is going to vary based on the model. Here's a different guy here. And this guy has a plasma gun, a combi plasma, I should say. And then he's got his little sword there, his power sword. So you can tweak your models, and I'm sure you want to buy extra models. So you're paying points for the actual model, and then depending on which weapons that you equip with them, just like Warhammer 40,000 8th edition. And just kind of wrap up the components that you get. You're going to get these tactics cards. So you can see this is a level 1 sniper tactic. We've got a level 2 sniper tactic. And we've got stuff like level 1 demolition tactic, level 2 demolition tactic. So this little stack here is all sort of specialists. Typically what you're going to do in your kill team is you're going to have one leader, and then you're going to have up to 3 other specialists. And these are just going to give them access to different tactics that you can spend command points during the course of the game to execute these. And then they also get some other special abilities, which I'll show you. And then you have some more different kinds of tactics here. You have 6 of these sort of generic tactics. These are typically allowing you to re-roll dice and so on for charges and shooting and combat. But then you can see you have Genestealer Cult tactics. And then if we go down here a little bit, you have Adeptus Mechanicus tactics. So these are specific to your faction. So there's a lot of tactics that you can do. And it's actually, frankly, a little overwhelming the first couple times you play to remember all of the possibilities. Because like I said, you got access to these 6, and then you have your specialist tactics, and then you have your faction tactics as well that you can get access to. Some other component bits before we get into the rules. You get some dice here. You got some D10s for some different random things that might happen. They give you a little ruler. And they give you this cool little begin here guide. They've been doing this lately on some of their box games. This is really nice. It gives you a real general flair of the game. This is like basically the core rules. I mean, there's definitely more to it, but it gives you like, okay, this is how it's going to work. And so you can sit down and start playing and shooting. Like if you had kids or something, you could just jump in and play with those. And then they give you a little bit of lore to the different factions that are included in terms of how they relate to the kill team. And they are going to have other expansion boxes for the different factions in the rulebook. I like this to kind of get you started. If you want to do that, it'll come with some terrain and this little lore guide and stuff. And I assume some of these tactics cards, which I'll talk more about in a second. In the last little bit here, I'm going to kind of go through this and then also show you a little bit of how the game works. On the table is this core manual, and this is a good size manual here. And you might say, hey, is this one of those rule books that Games Workshop likes to make with tons of fluff? No, there's a bunch of rules and faction specific things about how to build all of your different armies and kill teams within this book. So everything you need is actually in this book, and they are going to be selling this book separately. So if you don't feel like buying this whole board and all the terrain and stuff, and you have maybe a bunch of models you want to use already and a bunch of terrain already, then you can go ahead and just buy this core book, and this is going to keep you set for the most part with all of the armies. I'll get into a little bit more caveats in terms of that, but let's flip into here and see what's going on. So just to give you a sense of how it's broken down, you've got the rules here, and there's about maybe 30 pages of rules, and there's some good examples and stuff. And then you've got another, I think I count there's like 12 different missions that you can use. Some are just kind of open-ended fun missions, and there's some campaign stuff that'll go through here. And then the rest of this book here is all kill team specific rules. So that the last like 140 pages is all specific stuff for your kill teams. And this is sort of an interesting note here. It says Shadow War. And they've mentioned on their website and things, if you remember last year, there was a box set called Shadow War Armageddon, which took an old rule set from the 90s, Necromunda, and then moved it into the 40K Army universe proper with Space Marines and Chaos Marines and Tyranids and all that stuff. This is very much a replacement for Shadow War. Now, most of the models that you would have bought and used for Shadow War Armageddon will work just fine in here. They're just going to play a little bit differently, and they're going to be pointed out a little bit differently. But all of that terrain that you got in that box set, if you were lucky enough to get the Armageddon box set or any of the other armies and stuff that you picked up, perfectly suitable for this. All you really need is this book. So if you bought Shadow War Armageddon, had the terrain, had the models, and you're like, nobody's going to be playing that anymore, just get this book, and then you'll be good to go. So here we're going to get into this section of the core rules. I'm not going to really flip through this. I'm just going to show you how it plays on the table. That's much, much easier. But let's go ahead and jump forward to actually building out your kill teams and so on. Actually, before we do that, let's talk about another little step in terms of preparing before we actually play the game. You're going to pick one of your missions here. And there's a lot of different missions that you can do. I've just been playing through this open play Covert War, which you kind of roll a D3 on, and then it kind of generates different victory conditions. So I've played through a couple of those. And it talks a little bit about the pre-battle. Now, the one thing I want to mention here is the scouting phase, which is an interesting little bit. And in here on this page is the scouting phase. Now you can choose to play with or without that. It's not a make or break thing. It's just kind of a nice fluffy thing. But I like kind of playing with it. It just adds that little bit of seed of randomness. So each player can take a D6 and they'll set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And that will sort of give them a little bit of an initiative in how they're going to start the game. You might scout enemy forces. You might eliminate sentries, scout terrain, and so on, plant traps. And some of these will interact with each other. So if somebody chose take forward positions, then if the other player chose eliminate sentries, they would be able to then react against those models that actually move forward and so on. So that's kind of a fun little thematic bit, and there's kind of a little bit of a risk reward type of thing that's going on there. So that's a fun little bit that you can do right before the game. And there's a whole mess of missions. Some are more narrative oriented. They'll give you setups for the battlefield. And then you'll also have some match play missions. And there are setups for if you decide to use playing 3 and 4 player game, which I think could come up, use 2 of these boards together and then set up the terrain accordingly. And you can play a 3 or 4 player mission on the larger size. So let's talk quickly about how to actually build a kill team so you can know a little bit about what's involved. Like I said, they do give you cards to write on. There's actually going to be a pack of blank cards that you can write on and get a whole bunch of those. And there's rosters and actually cards in the back of the book here that you can photocopy and print out, and there'll be PDFs available so you can just download them and print them out there as well for free. So the first thing to talk about is command points and tactics here. So each team's going to start with 1 command point, and they can use that and spend that to do some of these tactics. So if we take a zoom in there, you can see some of these cost 1 command point, some of them cost 2. You'll get 1 command point at the start of each round, and then your leaders and stuff will actually generate command points for you as well. So that's just something. So again, there's going to be a lot of different tactics that you can choose to use. Or for your first game, I would actually recommend, I jumped in with everything. And I'd say, you know what, just jump in and play the game, get a feel for it, because it is slightly different than 8th edition. And it's frankly slightly different than any other skirmish game that I've played. So it's probably a good idea to sort of just play through half a game or a game of it and get kind of the gist of it. And now it's going to talk about doing specialist. Now specialists are sort of your very unique special characters that you're going to focus in on. And they're going to be the main people that you sort of level up and they get new abilities and things. Now the rest of your team is going to be what's known as the fire team. And that whole group, everybody else that's not a specialist or a leader, is going to level up as a group, which is pretty cool. Now the one thing to note here, if we look at this, is you can see the specialists, if they're level 1, they're going to be plus 0 points. Because remember I said you pay points for the type of model plus the guns. Well, this is actually going to increase in points for the different specialists. So every game that you're going to play, you play to an agreed upon number of points, which is usually 100. But you set up a pool of models beyond that 100 points, and then you can pick and choose as you wish to add those into whatever mission that you want to run. But again, as these level up, they're actually going to increase in points, but you're always locked into that 100 points. So there shouldn't be any kind of balance issues with runaway leaders because you're always coming to the table with 100 points. You set up your kill team pool beforehand. So if a character does die, and they can die, you've got a reserve amount that you can just pull in. There's no like buying and selling guys and stuff like that. There's not really much of an economy to the campaign, which is good because that's one of the drawbacks of most of these skirmish campaigns is the runaway leader problem. This goes a little bit of a way to fix that. So here we're going to just take a look at these 2 specialists. You're always going to have 1 leader specialist, and then you have a bunch of these different other specialists, medic, heavy, this is a combat specialist. So some will be like a sniper specialist and so on, and you're going to assign that. So like this guy fella here, he's got what's called a stalker bolter gun. You can see with the extra scope and the little strap there. So this is more of a sniper bolt gun. So I gave him the sniper specialist, and that gives him some better abilities for shooting from long range and so on. Now you're going to have tactics here. So you got level 1, 2, and 3 tactics. Same with the combat here. And then you have this little decision tree here. So as you level up, let's just take a look at this card here. So as you get experience through the course of the campaign, you can see once you hit this here, then you're going to get to level 2, level 3, then level 4, and there's some other things to mark there. So once you choose, you get the level 1 leader ability, or in this case, the level 1 combat ability. Then when you get to level 2, you pick from one of these 2. And then when you get to level 3, you pick from one of the two under the one you picked at level 2. And then everybody for level 4 choose any ability from this tree that you have not chosen for the model. So then you get to pick anything else. So you kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll have 3 that you didn't pick, possibly, and you can kind of play around with that. So so not only do you have a lot of tactics to use, each of the specialists is going to have an increasing number of passive and active abilities that they add to that. So again, you're always going to have 1 leader and up to 3 specialists, and then possibly some other models that make up your fire team, and that fire team is going to level up as a group. So let's just take a look at the very simple Adeptus Astartes or Space Marine kill team that you can get, just as an example. And this sort of format that I'm going to show you is going to be the same for everybody. Now they have these sort of D10 charts here, so you can generate some backgrounds and sort of motivations for your kill team and all that stuff, or just kind of pick and choose from it to kind of give you some flavor and maybe paint your models in a certain way and that kind of fun stuff. And they have this for every single kill team that's in here, so that's just a little fun bit. And then they have a name generator. So I don't know, I'm kind of like, why did you go into all this extra trouble to do names and stuff? But I think it's cool because if you get really into the game, it's just going to give you just little things to kind of, pick and choose from and give you some ideas for stories and things like that. And then, of course, we have here the tactics that are specific to the kill team. Now, here's a potential gripe I have with the game. So, for example, we have these cards here. These are for the Adeptus Mechanicus. Now, in the book, just like the Space Marines, there's 6, and then there's 6 for the Adeptus Mechanicus. But there's 10 tactics cards. So there's 4 in here that aren't in the book. Well, that's not a big deal. And it's the same with the Genestealer cults. There's 6 in the book and there's 12 cards here. But that makes me start to think in terms of the expansions. Let's say they release they're going to have a Space Wolf kill team expansion, I think, coming out on the release day. So there's 6 here that they can use. Does that mean that expansion is going to have 6 extra cards that you can use? Now, for me, I've got a Space Wolf kill team that I put together for Shadow War Armageddon, and I kind of don't want to spend the money and get the Space Wolf starter set when I just kind of want some extra tactics, because I've got terrain and all this stuff, and I've got those models from before. So I hope that they sell the cards extra, but there's been no word that they'll do that. So it's a minor thing, because you still get the 6 in the book, and you could just have your buddy show you his cards. I don't know, but that's a little bit odd that they would do that and sort of hide the extra tactics behind sort of the extra paywall of those expansion starter packs, whatever. So that's just a weird thing. Now, for each of the factions, it's going to give you a data sheet for the legal models that you can use. And you can look at these and you see, hey, these look just like the Warhammer 40,000 data sheets for these models. They're very close, and I thought they were exactly the same, but they are definitely not upon further inspection. So you can grab scouts, that's great. Got some scouts from Shadow War. Got tactical marines, that's great. You can have reavers and intercessors. These are the new Primaris guys. That's pretty cool. So you can pick and choose here, and then these are going to have a certain amount of points that they cost. And then also they tell you which kinds of weapons and things that they can use. Now, the one thing to just look at here is you got your typical stat line. So you got movement, 6 inches, weapon skill, 3+, ballistic skill, 3+, weapon skills at close combat, ballistic skills when you're shooting, strength, toughness, wounds, number of attacks, the leadership, which is important in this game especially, the saves, and then the max. So this is a new column here. So at max, I can have only 2 tactical marine gunners in my kill team. That's deployed. And then tactical sergeant, I can only have 1. Now, if you look down here at the specialist, the leader is a sergeant only. So if I want to take a leader, I'm going to have to definitely take a tactical sergeant, which is going to cost me some points. So you always have to take a leader. Now, the heavy is a marine gunner here. And if we go up to the scouts, so the scouts, you can see they can be sergeants and gunners as well. And this shows you who has access to which specialisms. They call them specialisms instead of specialities. But I don't know what I'm talking about as far as the English language goes. So maybe specialism is a word. So in this case, leader, sergeant only, heavy, specialism is a gunner only. And then all the other folks in here can be comms, demolition, scout, or sniper. You see there's no combat specialists allowed from this. So this gives you a breakdown of what you can take. And they have the special abilities and stuff like that. And then, I didn't mention back here. Actually, not back there, but up here. Let's say we're choosing Death Watch. Sometimes, for most of these kill teams, you'll have some other little special rules here. So the Death Watch can, when they shoot, sort of use different ammunition. So the Hellfire round, this weapon always wins on a 2+. That's really good. So that's the special issue ammunition rule. And then they have a little thing here saying that you can take the Reavers and the Intercessors from the normal Space Marine thing. And there's a similar rule with the Genestealer, Cult, and the Tyranid. So some of these guys might have special rules above and beyond all that. So if we look here, we can take a look at the different points. So you've got all the weapons, and it's got all of the different ranges and special abilities and stuff. And that's where these cards are going to come in handy, so you're not always flipping back to the book or printing out the sheet, like I said, and writing it down. They did say that they're going to come out with an app for it at some point, so that'll be pretty cool. Hopefully there's like a printable format. You can just go in the app, up, add your guys, you know, increase points, decrease points, and then hit print, and then, you know, be able to just print it out. And then here we have the points for the different models. So you can see here a Reaver Sergeant is 17. I should probably zoom in a little bit. And then, you know, the regular Reavers 16 and so on. And then based on the weapons you choose, so if I give somebody a missile launcher, that's going to cost 5 extra points, whereas the Astartes shotgun doesn't cost any points. And then you've got some other war gear and stuff. So again, you're going to just add all that up to 100 points. So just to kind of round out the rule book, let's talk about the campaigns here and how this is going to work. So here they give you a 2d6 table to roll on, and this is going to allow you to pick from some of the campaigns that I showed you before. So you can play them as one-offs, or you can kind of go and visit here and then sort of randomly generate a mission. Now, the one interesting thing to talk about here is, let's take a look at one of these missions back here, and I'll tell you about how the campaign is going to work. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of every campaign, but each of the ones that has a campaign sort of ability to it is going to have this little resources section. And it says, in a campaign game, if the attacker wins the mission, the defender loses 1 intelligence and 1 morale. If the defender wins the mission, the attacker loses 1 morale. So what does that mean? So each kill team will start with 8 points in these different attributes. So the attributes are intelligence, morale, territory. I think there's 5 different ones. So everybody's going to start with 8 in those. And then you're going to then lose. You're not going to ever gain points or gain resources. You're going to lose. As soon as you hit 0 in one of those resources, you become what's known as a guerrilla team, and you are almost effectively eliminated from winning the campaign. You can pretty much not win, except for the case of sudden death. Now, if through the course of playing the campaign, let's say you did a weekly campaign or whatever, you played a fixed number of games, let's say at the end of that, then every team had at least 1 resource at 0, then you will play a sudden death sort of final match, and that's where the multiplayer thing will kind of come in. So, and you could just set it up like that too. You could say, okay, these are the top 4 teams. They're all going to play in one big match, and then the winner of that wins everything or something. So that's kind of the general overview of how the campaign works. There's not a lot of after the battle stuff here. You will do casualty rolls and things like that. You can add new specialists and all. It kind of breaks all that stuff down. You can see the fire team and all that works. Now, the one interesting thing, I'm just going to kind of leave this here. There's nothing really too special about that, but you can see here's the new recruit box. Okay, so remember I said a fire team sort of levels up together. And so as models are joining the fire team, they're going to be able to get access to these sort of level up abilities there. And then they're going to cost more points per model as they level up. But if you want to take in, let's say a bunch of your fire team dies or something, obviously that's going to happen. So you can bring in new models. You just pay the points, you know, in terms of, you know, what they're going to be for that particular game. It's not like your money that you're spending. And then for their first game, if you've marked them as a new recruit, they're just going to be as if they were new. Now, if they live through that game, you're going to erase that checkbox, and then they're going to then match the level of the rest of your fire team. So they're immediately just going to level way up, possibly, if it's several games in the campaign, and then you can get some special abilities for them. So that's a really cool kind of streamlined way to do that. And I think the reason that this is a little bit more of a streamlined maybe competitive type of campaign or league system is because they are going to support this with organized play. So it's less story driven than something like Necromunda. So the in-between game stuff is not as crunchy. It's a little bit more streamlined and simplified. And theoretically, we'll see as this plays out, more balanced in terms of, you know, the forces that you're bringing to the table and what you have at your disposal and so on. So it'll be interesting to see how campaign works in organized play, if they even do that, but it seems like it's geared towards that. or if they'll just do, organized play, you bring your best 100-point guys, and then that's it. So that's kind of a general overview of what's in the book. So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay itself and how it works and everything. Okay, very simply, I set up the board here. This is actually a double-sided board, so you can use two sides, and then I got the terrain all set up and agreed upon. And then there's deployment zones that are depicted. So in this case, I just grabbed a random mission for this video and set up kind of there's a little bit of an arc in this corner. And then if you go over there, there's an arc in that corner, and I tucked them under that little ruined temple, and you can see the aberrants and their little hybrid buddies sort of sneaking out of the temple and so on. So you do the setup, and you're going to deploy back and forth, one model at a time, based on a roll-off or however the mission says. Sometimes if you do that scouting phase where you can pick the D6 and do something different, you can have guys come on later. The Genestealer Cult has an ambush special ability which allows them to come on later and so on. So there might be some variations to how the setup is, but it's basically one model, one model, one model. And then you're going to roll off for initiative. And whoever gets the higher initiative is going to go first, and they're immediately going to then go into their movement phase, at which point they will then move every model on their side. And all of these guys can move 6 inches, so I'm just going to move every 6 inches. Now you can climb up and down these different ruins. You just kind of move up. Now you can't, unlike some other games, you can't stop mid-ruin. You've got to make the full run there. So that's an interesting bit. But you don't need the ladders or anything like that. So we can just move everybody around. And this is a 5-inch. Is it 5 inches? I thought these are all 5. Yep. That's a 5-inch there. So he's going to move there, and he'll make it to the bottom. Now there is rules for like jumping and falling and stuff like that. So we can move everybody around. I'm not being real precise here. Move this guy up there, and he moves over there, and he jumps over there. Okay. So now I've moved all my guys. And they've all been moved out there. And then now my opponent is going to move all of their guys. Now one thing you can do when you move, just like 40K and Age of Sigmar, is you can roll a D6 and add that, and that will be allowing you to run or advance. So if I run this guy up here, like he moves 12, he moves a whole bunch, right? He moves way up here. Don't treat your models like that. And then, so you do that. Now the other thing you can do is during the movement phase, let's just move everybody up a little bit here. These guys dirtle up there and so on. These guys are just going to kind of hang back, let's say. Now let's say this is the setup in the next round. Instead of doing a move or an advance, you can do a charge. And there's no separate charge phase. It's part of the movement phase. So that's different than Warhammer 40,000. Then you can roll the charge dice and then hopefully roll good. And you have to be able to move that model within an inch. So in this case, I rolled a 7. I think that's the 7. And so you can move up there and get into base-to-base contact. Now, if you decided to run or charge for that matter, then you cannot shoot. So after the movement phase, everybody's moved, my whole team, your whole team, then we're going to go into the shooting phase. Now, if you did not move your character, so let's just take a peek at these guys, so pretend that I didn't move them. If I didn't move them, then these guys will get to shoot first. Anybody that doesn't move is considered to be ready, okay? But the difference with the shooting phase is you're going to alternate models. So in this case, the Deathwatch player had initiative. He's going to pick a model first to shoot, and then we're going to go back to the Genestealer Cult team. They're going to pick a model to shoot. Now you're going to use your ready models first. So let's say the Deathwatch guy, even though he's got the initiative, he moved all of his models. So that's fine. But the Genestealer Cult player didn't move these two. So he's going to be able to shoot with both of these ready models first because they did not move. And then we're going to go alternating back and forth, Deathwatch, Genestealer, Deathwatch, Genestealer, until you've shot with all of your models. Now again, if you've advanced, if you ran, you can't shoot. If you charge, you can't shoot because if you are in base-to-base contact there, then you cannot shoot unless you have a pistol. In that case, you can then shoot the person that you're engaged with. And so you also cannot shoot into combat here. So let's say this guy was over here like so, and then he wanted to shoot over here. Now he can't. You can't legally target this guy here because he doesn't want to shoot his buddy. So it's very, very simple. If you ran, if you charged, because if you charge, you're probably into base-to-base contact and you can't shoot anybody. Now the other thing to note about charging, before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, if I do charge, then the person that I'm charging, I'm going to declare I'm charging this guy. He gets a chance to overwatch and shoot back. And so when you shoot back, the only thing that you can hit on is a 6. So typically you can hit, like the Space Marines guys here, they can hit on 3s. and then the Genestealer Cult guys aren't as good, but there's more of them. They can hit on 4. When you're doing Overwatch, I declare the charge. Before I even roll anything, I will do a roll for my weapons, and only 6s will hit in that case because you're a little bit flustered. And then after that, if he's not dead, then he'll roll and hopefully make his charge in there. Now the other difference is if you fail your charge roll, you can still move that distance. You just cannot become within 1 inch of that. So let's say I was here and I rolled a 3, which isn't enough to get there. I can still move up to that 3 if I want. Because remember, it's not a separate phase. It's all in the movement phase. So let's talk quickly about shooting and combat. They're basically the same. And they're really basically the same as Warhammer 8th edition. So shooting, ballistic skill, so you're going to roll a die. You can see the number of attacks here on this is rapid fire 1. There's some special things, I'm not going to get into all these, but it's all 40k 8th edition stuff. So rapid fire, if you're within half that distance, 24 inches, then you get to roll an extra die. So in this case, I would get 2 dice if I was 12 inches or less. And then I need to roll 3s. So let's say I roll 2 3s. Then I'm going to roll the wound. And so the strength of the weapon is a 6. And let's say I was targeting something with a toughness of 3. So that's double. So the difference in the strength to the target's toughness is going to tell you what you need to roll to wound. In this case, it's double. So all I need to roll is a 2. If these were equal, if it was strength 6 on toughness 6, I would need to roll a 4. So you roll a hit. If you get a hit, any of those hits, you will roll to wound. If you have double the toughness, you need a 2. If you have more than the toughness, you need a 3. If you have equal to the toughness, you need a 4. If your strength has less than the toughness, you need a 5. And then if you have half or worse of the toughness, you need a 6 to wound. But it's still possible to wound if you get it in the right spot there. And then the attacking model for any successful wound roll is going to roll their save there, if that focuses. Yep. So that's going to be their save. So all the wounds they got through, they're going to roll. In this case, they need a 4+ to save it. Now, if they fail to save it, now most of these models in this case are 1 wound models. These aberrants are actually 2 wound models. So in that case, you're going to reduce the number of wounds. So let's say we got 1 wound on him, and then his hit points would go down from 2 to 1. But let's say we're in close combat later here, and whoops, this guy gets a hit on him, and what's going to happen? Let's say he gets 2 hits on him. So he's a 1 wound model, so you think, oh, he got enough wounds in, he's going to die. Not the case. If 1 or more wounds would reduce the target model to 0 or less, you are then going to roll a d6, and then if you roll a 4, 5, or 6, then the model is dead. They will come off. If you roll a 1, 2, or 3, then you're going to stick a flesh wound on that model. Like that. So he gets a flesh wound. He did 2 damage to him that was unsaved. You're going to take the flesh wound, stop any extra damage. So plasma weapons are kind of interesting because you want to do like a heavy bunch of damage or something, but it only really matters if you're doing it against something that maybe has more than 1 wound, which a lot of stuff doesn't. So you got to think real carefully about how you apply your damage, because any excess damage is going to shave off of it, and you're going to put on 1 flesh wound. And the flesh wound is going to reduce that model's capability. It's going to make them have -1 to their hit rolls and so on, and a couple other things. Once you get 3 flesh wounds on you, though, you're going to be dead no matter what. So you can't just walk around with baggage of flesh wounds on you. You're just going to fall and succumb to your wounds. So after we alternate shooting phase, then we're going to go back through and then again alternate the fighting phase. The fighting phase is similar to the shooting phase, that any models that charged that round will get the first action. So if Deathwatch has the guys that have charged, they'll act first, and then the Genestealer guys, and you go back and forth, similar to the combat phase in 8th edition and Age of Sigmar. After you've resolved that, then you're going to go into the morale phase. And what you're going to do is you're going to check if your kill team is broken. And that means that all your models are either having a flesh wound, or they're shaken, or they've been taken out of action. And you're going to roll 2d6 and compare that to your leadership ability of your leader. And if you roll above that, then that team's going to be broken. They're going to suffer some penalties. You can do a voluntary withdrawal and scoot everybody out of dodge. But then after you make that check, you're going to go and roll for everybody that has a flesh wound. Well, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to remove anybody that's shaken and remove the shaken marker. But how do they become shaken? Well, what you're going to do is you're going to do a test here, and you're going to just test that particular model's leadership. And anybody that has a flesh wound, you've got to do this for, and you're going to roll, and then any other model that's shaken or has been taken out of action is going to add to that roll, so it's going to slowly push it above that model's particular leadership. If you do roll and fail, then they become shaken. Okay, so when they're shaken, they can't do anything on the next turn, and then you've got to test again. So the next turn, you're going to do the morale phase, see if the whole team is broken, remove any shaken markers, and then test again to see if they stay shaken. Other models that are within 2 inches there will then reduce that roll by 1, so you can sort of alleviate that. They kind of group up and huddle together. Well, that's pretty much the overview of the game. You play for 5 rounds and whatever the objective is. The only other little cool tidbit I want to mention is you see these little manhole covers here? These are really cool. So each of these different kill zones is going to have a little effects and features, and there's a little table you can pick and choose or roll a d6 to generate some random sort of environmental feature. And I love having these little manhole covers. It gives you a way to sort of, if you're within, I think, 2 inches of this, then you can jump over on your next movement phase and come out of a different manhole cover that's within a certain range of that one. So you can kind of jump around the board sort of sneakily throughout the game. And there's different effects and things, and some of the other kill zone boxes with different environments and terrain will have different effects. So that's pretty much the overview of the game. Okay, so that is Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team. Well, what do I think of it? Well, let's kind of go into my 3 sort of normal review things in terms of playtime, player count, and then what to compare it to. Playtime, the games have been about an hour or so, just a little bit over, but that's kind of learning everything and also trying to digest all of the different tactics. Like I said during the walkthrough bit, I jumped in sort of with both feet, learning all the tactics, and there's just so many tactics. You get your 6 tactic cards. You start with the level 1 tactics for each of your specialists, so that's 1 for the leader and 3 more for the different specialists. Now we're up to 10, and then you have just a boatload of Genestealer cult tactics. Now you could probably make it to where you have to pick 1 or 2 of those or whatever to go into a game, but it's a lot to go in there, and then each of your specialists has their own special ability, and then just kind of learning the game overall. So that's going to add some upfront time, although once an app comes out or once I kind of better organize the teams in my head and actually kind of more like play for real, so to speak, then it'll be a little bit better because I'll have written everything down on cards and stuff. I'm going to do all that stuff or print something out, make it, just organize that information a little bit easier. So that is a kind of a barrier to entry that sort of counteracts, I think, sort of the beginner friendliness of most of the rest of the game. But like I said, you don't have to play with tactics right away. You can just jump in and play with the models and the guys and everything. In terms of the player count, haven't played it above 2 player. It seems like it would be fine with 3 or 4 players. I can't say that I've really played a skirmish game with more than 2, so I don't really know how that works, other than, Billy backstabs me and kills Roger or whatever, and so that kind of stuff is always kind of wonky with a multiplayer game that seems like it's geared exactly for 2 players. You've got sort of commiseration, but it's also part of the game. But that can also lean towards a ruined experience kind of thing. So player count's toughy, but only played it with 2. In terms of what to compare it to, well, first off, obviously Shadow War Armageddon is the main one, and this is a much cleaner, more updated, quote unquote, modern rule set than Shadow War Armageddon. You could say that this is definitely a replacement for it. They've said as much. I think if you were really into Shadow War, then you're good. You don't really necessarily need this box. You can just get the rule book. Although if you want to get the cool terrain and the board and stuff, then you can get this too. So I wouldn't think that there's much in the way of feeling bad about Shadow War being replaced, because 90% of those models that you used in Shadow War are going to be usable here. The only thing that I can think of that you had that you could use in Shadow War that you couldn't use in this are some of the character specialists. Like I had a Dark Eldar Shadow War team, and I had the I forget the name of the things. The things with the wings, right? You would like bring those into like a one-off mission. What the heck is those called? I want to call them Racks. W-R-A-C-K-S. I don't think that's right for some reason. Anyway, so like I can't use those in here because you can only use the witches and the Kabalites, and I got a bunch of witches for my Shadow War kill team. The other thing is, compared to like Necromunda and Frostgrave and all that stuff. So the thing that's different about this is the whole I move everybody and then you move everybody, and then then you alternate shooting and then alternate the combat. That's actually really cool. I really like that because you still maintain the overall strategic arc of your turn, where you're sort of committing very early on. Okay, move this guy here, 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 here. So I've got to move everybody and sort of set up an overall plan instead of just purely tactical. I move, shoot, do all my stuff. You do a guy. Oh, okay. So now I'm going to do this, and I'm going to move, shoot, do some stuff. And that's fine. That's cool. I love it. But this is different. I've not seen a game that is sort of a hybrid of I go and do everything, and then you go and do everything. It's either that, so like Warhammer 40K is like I move my guys, shoot my guys, combat my guys. There's a little bit of, alternating activation in the combat, but I do all my psychic spells and everything, and then you do everything. And there's like a half an hour break between turns, between me doing my turn. And so this is a hybrid of that. So you have the alternating and sort of grand strategy of it. I think it works really well. It's a very kind of a unique thing, and really kind of, you have the whole fun of the movement phase. The movement phase, like in those larger war games, is like the game in a lot of ways, because once you smash together and roll dice, it's like that's kind of being handled. The movement phase is where most of the planning and a lot of like what you can do that would actually, you could win or lose the game based on that. So that's cool. And then, as far as the like size of the board, which I mentioned at the very beginning, that surprisingly works very, very well. You're right in the thick of the action. One thing I didn't mention is that I didn't get into a lot of the combat modifiers. So what they do is the ranges on the weapons are, I think, all exactly the same as 40K. But if you are shooting at more than half the distance, so let's say a bolt gun has a 24-inch range, if you're shooting more than 12 inches, you get a -1 to hit. So you can still shoot at the full range, but you get the minus hit. So if they're within 12 inches, you just hit at the normal 3+ or whatever it might be. And then of course it's probably rapid fire, so you get the extra die anyway. But yeah, so that's another little change there. So that kind of scaling in terms of the range and everything, I should have really mentioned that during the rules, but that's a big one. And there's some other modifiers and things, like if they have a flesh wound, or if you have a flesh wound, you get -1 to hit, things like that. But back to my main point of the size of the board, it really works. They give you enough terrain in here in the box to, you don't really have to, it doesn't really feel that dense, but it's dense enough for the size. So I just like this format. And I like being able to have the board here and just, literally the setup. Like one of the problems with like Necromunda and Shadow War and Frostgrave and stuff is the setup. Because you'll set it up and be like, okay, let's play 2 or 3 games on that, because I don't want to set it up again in between each game. This one is very simple. Lay the board out, set these up, ruins in a certain way. They give you some different maps and things and layouts in the rule book. You play a game, hour or so, and then just rearrange the pieces real quick or use one of the different maps and then play that. And the setup is non-existent almost. So that's really cool. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, because I've not seen a game like this really. This could be just my ignorance, but I've not really seen a game like this be super competitive and have a lot of organized play and all that kind of stuff. So I think the quick setup, the size of the setup as well, you could have multiple pairs in a big game room or something, and support that. The quick playing time, the streamlined rules, it feels like it's balanced over the course of the campaign. I like those changes. I like how they read. Obviously I haven't played a campaign or anything, but I like how they seem like they're gearing it towards like, okay, let's address the runaway problem from a league or a campaign, which is a big deal. Or it can be a big deal, I should say. Especially if you're trying to play it competitively. If you're playing it as sort of a story arc, I've done it where I've restarted my Gene Stiller cult team like 3 or 4 times in the Shadow War Armageddon campaign. I was like, well, that team's not very good. And they got killed and I start up a new one. And then I had my Sisters of Battle that never lost a game. But then you have the new team versus the Sisters of Battle team, let's say, and then it's like, well, that's not fun. Even though it's fine, it's a dice game, so it's gonna shake itself out. But it seems like they've really targeted this towards being a streamlined and more competitive and more balanced and all that fun stuff. So yeah, so the only caveats I really had was that weird issue with the card distribution, and it might be packing extra tactics cards into some of the expansions, which I don't really know how I feel about that. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, so I think that might be a weirdness if they don't actually sell those cards by themselves. But other than that, I really like how everything's packaged. You know, you can get these kill zones and you've just got a board and some terrain and you're ready to go. And I don't know, it just seems like it's really well thought out. The Shadow War people shouldn't be too upset because they're going to move right into this. It's arguably a better game, a different game. It's got different expectations to it, but Shadow War didn't really have much of a campaign anyway, so I definitely recommend folks take a look at it. It feels like it could be a nice beginner game, but I don't think it really is because, like I said, you got all the tactics, the really fine-grained army building and all that kind of stuff, so that would be kind of a barrier to entry. But if you and a buddy like went in the box and stuff and you were new at it, then I think you could definitely work through it and play it. But it's really fun. Like I said, I really like the hybrid of I go, you go versus the alternating activations. The mix of that is really fresh and interesting. And then the whole command ability thing is way overwhelming. But once you play it a couple times, you start to get into it, and it really adds that just extra layer of crunchiness that you might be missing from the rest of the game. So that is Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team. Thanks for watching.